The trend that has moved some North American Indian tribes away from plant food-based diets can be traced to Coronado, a 16th century Spanish explorer. Prior to his time, hunting was a hobby amongst most Indians, not a vocation. The Apaches were one of the few tribes who relied heavily on animal killing for survival. But all that changed as Coronado and his army traversed the west and midwest from Mexico. Some of his horses got away and quickly multiplied on the grassy plains. Indians retained this new denizen and the age of buffalo began. Horses replaced dogs as beasts of burden and offered excellent transportation. This was an important innovation to the Plains Indian, as the automobile would be to the Anglos later on. Life on the plains became very much easier and very quickly. From the east came another powerful influence: guns. The first American settlers brought their firearms with them. Because of the Indian threat, they were soon immersed in weapons development and succeeded in making more accurate and powerful weapons. But they also supplied weapons to Indians, who allied themselves with colonial causes. Because it was so much easier to kill an animal with a rifle than with a bow and arrow, guns spread quickly amongst the Indians. Between the horse and the rifle, buffalo killing was now very much simpler. The Apaches were joined by other tribes, such as the Sioux, the Cheyenne, the Arapahoes, the Comanches, and the Kiowas. These tribes lost the corn, gave up agriculture, and started living nomadic existences for the first time. It wasn't long before their food, clothing, and shelter were entirely dependent on one animal, the buffalo. George Catlin lamented this fact as early as 1830. He predicted the extinction of the buffalo, which very nearly happened, and the danger of not being diversified. Catlin pointed out, were the Plains Indians only killing a buffalo for their own use, the situation might not be so grave. But because the great beasts were being slaughtered for profit, they were destined to be wiped out. It was the white man who profited. There was an insatiable eastern market for buffalo tongue and buffalo robes. In 1832, Catlin described a wholesale buffalo slaughter carried out by 600 Sioux on horseback. These men killed 1,400 animals and then took only their tongues. These were traded to whites for a few gallons of whiskey. The whiskey no doubt helped to dull the Indian talent to make maximum use of an animal. Among the tribes who did not trade with whites, each animal was completely used, down to the hooves. No part went to waste. And buffalo were not killed in the winter, for the Indians lived on autumn-dried meat during that time. But now buffalo were killed in the winter most of all. It was in cold weather that their magnificent coats grew long and luxuriant. Catlin estimated that 200,000 buffalo were killed each year to make coats for people back east. The average hide netted the Indian hunter 1 pint of whiskey. Had the Indians understood the concept of animal extinction, they may have ceased the slaughter. But to the Indians, the buffalo was a gift from the Great Spirit, a gift which would always keep coming. Decades after the disappearance of huge herds, Plains Indians still believed their return was imminent. They danced the ghost dance designed to bring back the buffalo and prayed for this miracle as late as 1890. In spite of the ease and financial incentives of killing buffalo, there were tribes that did not abandon the old ways of the plains. In addition to the farming tribes of the southeast, tribes in the Midwest, Southwest and Northwest stuck to agriculture. For example, the Osaunji, the Pawnee, Arikaras, Mandans, Witichas and Canadians remained in permanent farming settlements. Even surrounded by buffalo, they built their homes of timber and earth. And among some of the Indians of the Southwest, cotton, basketry and pottery were preferred over animal-based substitutes like leather pouches. Catlin was eerily accurate when he predicted dire consequences for the buffalo-dependent tribes. To this day, it is these Indians who have fared the worst from assimilation with other races. The Sioux of South Dakota, for one, have the worst poverty and one of the highest alcoholism rates in the country. Conversely, the tribes who depended little or not at all on animal exploitation for their survival, like the Cherokee, Choctaw, Creek and Chickasaw, are thriving and growing, having assimilated without surrendering their culture. In the past, and in more than a few tribes, meat eating was a rare activity, certainly not a daily event. Since the introduction of European meat-based customs, the introduction of the horse and the gun, and the proliferation of alcoholic beverages and white traders, a lot has changed. Relatively few Indians can claim to be vegetarians today. But it was not always so. For most Native Americans of old, meat was not only not the food of choice, its consumption was not revered as in modern times when Americans eat turkey on Thanksgiving as if it were a religious duty. There was nothing ceremonial about meat. It was a plant, tobacco, that was used most extensively during ceremonies and rites, and then only in moderation. Big celebrations, such as fall festivals, centered around the harvest, especially the gathering of the corn. The Choctaws are not the only ones who continue to dance the corn dance. What would this country be like today if the ancient ways were still observed? I believe it is fair to say that the Indian respect for non-human life forms would have had a greater impact on American society. Corn, not turkey meat, might be the celebrated Thanksgiving Day dish. Fewer species would have become extinct, the environment would be healthier, and Indian and non-Indian Americans alike would be living longer and healthier lives. There might also be less sexism and racism, for many people believe that as you treat your animals, the most defenseless, so you will treat your children, your women, and your minorities. Without realizing it, the Indian warriors and hunters of ages past played right into the hands of the white men who coveted their lands and their buffalo. When the lands were taken from them and the buffalo herds decimated, there was nothing to fall back on. But the Indians who chose the peaceful path and relied on diversity and the abundance of plants for their survival were able to save their lifestyles, even after being moved to new lands where they could hang on, replant, and go forward. Now we, their descendants, must recapture the spirit of the ancient traditions for the benefit of all people. We must move away from the European influences that did away with the healthier style of living. We must again embrace our brothers and sisters, the animals, and return to the corn, once and for all. Rita Laws is Choctaw and Cherokee. She lives and writes in Oklahoma. Her Choctaw name, Hina Hanta, means bright path of peace, which is what she considers vegetarianism to be.